everyone, and welcome to our special coverage of China's two sessions. I'm Zhong Shi, live in Beijing. In about half an hour, Chinese Foreign Minister Wang will meet journalists at the Media Center in Beijing, where he will take questions on China's foreign policy and diplomatic relations. Stay with us on CGTN as we bring you live coverage of the event at the top of the next hour. Meantime, CGTN reporter Zhao Yunfei is live at the Media Center, where Chinese Foreign Minister Wang will meet the press in just 30 minutes. Yunfei, particularly high attention to this press conference this year, given the geopolitical situation we find ourselves in today. What more can you tell us about this presser?
Well, Zhongshi, this is certainly high attention here at the Media Center. This press conference hall is filled with people. This is certainly one of the most popular media events during this year's two sessions, as the world is closely watching China's foreign policy. The two sessions is the gathering political season for the countries to plan for its social and economic development. But also at the same time, since China is a major responsible country, its foreign policy would certainly influence the rest of the world, especially when it comes to this year's two session, comes amid a global uncertainties, rising global uncertainties. Now, the ongoing crisis in the Middle East really fueled the global turmoil since the beginning of 2026, when U.S. President Donald Trump military captured the Venezuela's President Nicolas Maduro, and then President Trump military coercions on Greenland and economic coercions as well. As the world is seeing a fragile transatlantic alliance, the world is watching China. Many Western leaders have paid visit to China since the beginning of 2026. But from China's perspective, its foreign policy has always been consistent. When we talk, in fact, ahead of the two sessions, a lot of the discussions have already been ongoing, and a lot of the questions has already been addressed when it comes to foreign policy. In the press conference ahead of this year's NPC, Lou Qingjian, the spokesperson of the fourth session of the 14th National People's Congress, mentioned about the China-U.S. ties. He stressed that the two sides should cooperate, strengthen communication, saying that to meet is better than to look away. To talk is better than to cut off. Addressing the relationship with Europe, Lou Qingjian made the remarks on Wednesday, saying that China and Europe do not have geopolitical conflict of interest or major geopolitical tensions. So when it comes to today, certainly this is a specific press conference that will address more about China's foreign policy. Wang Yi, China's top diplomat, will answer a question from the press. He is the Chinese foreign minister and also a member of the political bureau of CPC Central Committee. And Wang Yi really have a very busy schedule, especially when it comes to the beginning of 2026. We have seen him paying visit to Africa as the first overseas trip since 2026. He also visited Europe. He touched upon global governance system, saying the importance of it at the Munich Security Conference. And he also, another major remarks that he made was at the southern Chinese city of Guangzhou, where he, at the APEC senior officials meeting, and he mentioned about the importance that China has stressed to the open trade in the Asia-Pacific region, as well as China's contribution to the entire world. So, Zhongshi, when it comes to China's foreign policy, there's a wide range of topics that's being discussed from multiple perspectives and prospects, and we're expecting to see today's press conference very informational. Now back to you.
Yunfei, a packed hall there behind you as journalists from home and abroad are eager to hear China's positions, China's policies, and China's priorities. CGTN reporter Zhao Yunfei live at the Media Center. Thank you so much. And China's head of state diplomacy has strengthened high-level engagement, promoting stability, development, and cooperation. Let's now take a closer look at key diplomatic milestones in 2025.
Forging paths for the future through head of state diplomacy. China is charting a course for people-centered development at a historic crossroads. On Victory Day, President Xi Jinping called for justice amid a turbulent world.
Today, humanity again has to choose between peace and war, dialogue and confrontation, win-win cooperation, and zero-sum game. The Chinese people firmly stand on the right side of history and progress of human civilization. We will remain committed to the path of peaceful development and join hands with all peoples around the world in building a community with a shared future for humanity.
The 80th anniversary of the victory in the Chinese people's war of resistance against Japanese aggression serves as a stark reminder of the brutal Eastern theater of the anti-fascist war. President Xi also attended the Great Patriotic War victory celebrations in Russia, shining a spotlight on China's role alongside key members of the anti-fascist alliance in upholding the post-war international order. In the midst of a transforming world, President Xi proposed the Global Governance Initiative. He emphasized that all countries are equal participants, decision-makers, and beneficiaries in global governance. Speaking at the largest ever Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit in Tianjin, the Chinese president called on member states to take the lead in promoting stability. Against the backdrop of trade protectionism across most of 2025, President Xi sent a clear message: economic globalization benefits all, and no country can afford to retreat into isolation. His state visit to Vietnam, Malaysia, and Cambodia emphasized fostering mutually beneficial cooperation. His neighborhood diplomacy reinforced shared visions of development between China and Southeast Asian nations, particularly as Malaysia assumed its role as the rotating ASEAN chair. Upholding multilateralism. President Xi's international visits included the China Central Asia Summit in Kazakhstan and the APEC Economic Leaders Meeting in the Republic of Korea. In the historic city of Gyeongju, he put forward 5 proposals to promote open trade. Looking ahead, China will host APEC in 2026, with the southern city of Shenzhen renowned for its miracles of opening up. China's head of state diplomacy in 2025 showed China's commitment to practical cooperation and steadfast support for a rule-based international order. Zhao Yunfei, CGTN, Beijing.
And ahead of last year's APEC leaders meeting, Chinese President Xi Jinping met with U.S. President Donald Trump in Busan. The meeting helped steady the ship for China-U.S. relations amid rough waters, steering it the right direction. And for more on this, CGTN America correspondent Sean Calebs joins me now with an update. Sean, good morning to you. The Chinese foreign minister, chances are he will be talking about China-U.S. relations in that press conference today. What are you looking forward to finding out?
Yeah, I think that this is always one of the more anticipated events during the week plus of 2 sessions, the foreign ministers' news conference. It's a chance to hear both from domestic journalists asking their questions as well as international journalists, and we can expect them to be peppered by an array of questions. I think for the United States, a lot of people, of course, focused on the relationship between the U.S. and China, the 2 largest economies on Earth. There's no question the relations have been strained. And once again, we heard in the most recent work report of 2 sessions that China is once again reaching out, saying it would like to find a way to move forward and have constructive talks with the United States. But with so much going on and so much global uncertainty, especially around the trade issue right now, it'd be a good time for the 2 sides to be able to find a way to move forward. I think that everybody looks at it that there's something good and healthy about competition, but when it goes beyond that, that's when it becomes a concern. And we've heard Wang in the past. I love his flowery language, talking about the relationship between the U.S. and China can often be referred to as a boat on stormy seas, and you have to watch the whitecaps and be able to turn into the wind and be able to manage any kind of concerns. And I expect to hear more of that from him today as well. And also, people, I'm sure, are going to ask if indeed Donald Trump is going to come to China in April, as a lot of people have indicated, and we know Trump has talked about that back in the U.S. as well. If indeed that would happen, it'd be a good time for the two world leaders to sit down, talk face to face, and a chance to perhaps broach the kind of concerns or kind of questions that could have caused ripples between the two nations. And it's always better to have dialogue, to have the two nations sit down and talk. So obviously the two largest economies on earth sitting down face to face, especially in these turbulent times, being able to move forward, something I think a lot of people in the U.S. and China, let alone around the world, would like to see right now. Zhang Shi?
Sean, let me also ask you about Latin America, which has become a key participant in the Belt and Road Initiative and set an example of South-South cooperation. Amid regional challenges, how do you assess the current state of China-Latin America cooperation, and what are the prospects for taking this partnership to the next stage?
Yeah, I think there's no question that is such a huge issue right now. China has made a massive commitment to Latin America, to South America, Central America, and the Caribbean as well. We've seen a huge investment, something like $500 billion in trade between that region and China right now. And China has an investment of something like $14 billion within the country. So obviously China is looking at Latin America very closely. There's something like a dozen nations or more working with Belt and Road projects right now. And you have to talk about what has been going on in Peru, the port of Chancay. It is impossible to overstate how significant that is going to be to trade between that entire region and China as ships leave that area. There's having that massive port there, modern port built by a Chinese company, is going to cut between 10 and 14 days off of a trip overseas, so that's going to be very significant as well. The United States, though, has made it clear it would like to push China out of that hemisphere. But if you talk to experts, there's simply no way. It's too ingrained, has too many close ties with those nations down there, especially Chile, Peru, and Brazil. And the United States, for years and years and years, kind of looked at Latin America as in its backyard and thought that it always would be able to have these kind of wonderful trade relationships, these other relationships with military endeavors as well. And that perhaps is somewhat strained right now. We know the U.S. is making an effort to try and win over some of its friends and former friends in that area, but without question, China is very entrenched in that area with all its investments, with all the ties to the Belt and Road. BYD has its largest plant outside Asia in Brazil, and people are flocking to EVs in Latin America. Latin America has everything that China wants right now. It has lithium, it has iron, it has soybeans, it has beef, and conversely, they're able to import a number of items that make farming easier, make manufacturing easier. So there's tremendous ties between these two nations, and the United States, despite what it says, is simply not prepared to move in and offer those kind of trade arrangements with Latin America that China is offering. So I see more of the same and expect to hear Wang Yi talk about that, how important the Global South is to China now and, of course, moving forward.
Sean, appreciate your reporting. Thank you so much. And CGTN America anchor Elaine Reyes spoke about China-U.S. relations with Surab Gupta, Senior Asia-Pacific International Relations Policy Specialist at the Institute for China-America Studies. He says relations have been steady, but if the U.S. chooses a path that would worsen relations, China will not be scared.
What seems to be different in this relationship during this second Trump administration, especially in the way that the U.S. president is approaching and perhaps working with China on various issues?
I would say fundamentally the most important reason the relationship has remained rock solid and steady, I would say, is because of how China has approached Trump in the second administration. You know, in the first administration, it was caught off guard, Mr. Trump saying a lot of nice, sweet things, but then the administration taking fairly harsh measures from time to time. I think the Chinese government have been smart right from the get-go of Trump to lay it out very clearly that China does not seek bad ties with the U.S., but if the U.S. is going to go down that path, China is not scared of the U.S. in that regard, particularly in the area of trade and tech. And this has been a kind of a firm message that has come across, and I think it has registered at the U.S. end. I think that is important. The other important point with the Chinese side have been able to firmly communicate across is that, yes, Mr. Trump says a lot of nice things and favorable things towards Mr. Xi and towards China, but the bottom line is not what Mr. Trump says. It is what the Trump administration does. So I think there's this clarity in the messaging, which has really helped provide and a certain degree of deterrence that both sides have brought to the relationship, which has helped endow a degree of stability. And the hope now is that that stability can be both deepened and broadened during this particular year when Mr. Trump and Mr. Xi have multiple meetings slated.
And amid today's turbulent international landscape, China-EU relations carry heightened strategic significance and global implications. CGTN's Jen Kopstake explains the expectations from Europe as she looks ahead to Wang Yi's upcoming news conference.
Europe has been front and center of China's diplomatic calendar since the start of the year. Now, against a backdrop of persistent global instability, external economic pressures, this steady stream of high-level visits tells a story of pragmatic engagement between Beijing and Europe. As the two sessions charts China's roadmap for 2026, this European focus highlights a clear strategic trend. We've seen a succession of European leaders make their way to Beijing in recent months. This includes British Prime Minister Keir Starmer, Finnish Prime Minister Petteri Orpo, Irish Taoiseach Micheál Martin and German Chancellor Friedrich Merz. These visits underscore a reality that European capitals are increasingly leaning into, hedging against global volatility by maintaining or developing strong ties with China. This diplomatic surge isn't just symbolic, but anchored in economic reality. Both sides recognize that their markets remain highly complementary. Whether it's in the green energy transition, digital transformation, or stabilizing global supply chains, the drive for economic resilience is the overriding factor. And here in Beijing, the message from the two sessions is clear. China is committed to high-quality, open-door development, actively inviting European partners to collaborate. All eyes are on Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi's press conference. The expectation is that he will reiterate China's vision of a multipolar world, where cooperation rather than competition define the China-Europe relationship. Jen Kopstake, CGTN, Beijing.
And joining me in the studio are Zhao Hai, Director of International Political Studies at the National Institute for Global Strategy, and Professor Huang Jing from Shanghai International Studies University, and Director of the Institute for American and Pacific Studies. Gentlemen, fantastic to have both of you joining us on our special coverage today. I want to start off by talking about China-U.S. relations. Head of State diplomacy obviously has played an incredible role in steering this relationship forward. Mr. Zhao, starting with you, what is the status quo here between the two sides, and how important it is that we continue to see head of state diplomacy play a role in this relationship?
Well, thank you for having me. First of all, I think the current status quo is coming out of the consequences of the trade war since last year. Because China stands firm and actually fight back against the United States using every possible countermeasures, the United States realized the reality that they cannot repress and stop China's development and also trying to scare China off. So at the end of this struggle, I think the Busan meeting makes sure that the two top leaders are sitting down and talking with each other, reaching agreement that they should have a sort of a ceasefire or a kind of temporary stop. But however, it still depends on how the next step the U.S. will take. At this point, I think the top leadership are really sitting in behind the helm and directing the bilateral relationship. Again, I think moving forward, people are expecting high-level exchanges for this year. However, I think for this particular meeting and also in the coming weeks, we will see whether or not the first Trump visit to China will be realized or not. I mean, for Trump too. And the situation is changing. I think we heard about this global uncertainty, but I think that's an understatement. Right now, we're in either a rupture or a severe disruption of global order, economic and political. So I think that's more important for the two most important countries in the world to talk to each other, communicate with each other, and work together to find common solutions.
Mr. Huang, just give me a minute. I'll be back with you in just a few moments' time. For now, we do want to get an update from our reporter Panina Karibe from CGTN Africa. She is in Beijing to cover the two sessions. Panina, good morning to you. As a journalist from Africa, what is your observation on the cooperation between China and Africa?
Well, you know, for me, from an African perspective, the most striking observation, of course, is that the two sides, China and Africa, have moved past the era of brick and mortar. We are celebrating 70 years of diplomatic ties, and we have seen a strategic shift from large infrastructure to what I like to call precision partnership. Now, this could be the small yet beautiful livelihood projects or digital infrastructure, but I think the message from the continent is very clear that Africa is not just a destination for already manufactured goods, but it is now a partner in the global supply chain. Now, what I mean by this is that now bringing us to the second point, of course, talking about the potential for global South cooperation. And this isn't just about trade volumes, it's about now the new model of modernization. So the major milestone we are watching out for this year is 1st May, because this is the implementation of the zero tariff treatment for 53 African countries. This is huge because what it seeks to do is correct that trade imbalance that existed between China and Africa. And so now, this means that African entrepreneurs can have access to 1.4 billion consumers. We're talking from agribusinesses in a country like Malawi to tech startups in a country like Kenya. Now, this is what Africa is saying, that it is industrialization on its own terms. It's a really big deal right now for the African continent. Now, in just a few minutes, we'll be hearing from Foreign Minister Wang, again, from an African lens. What we're looking to hear is how this 15 5-year plan and the new quality productive forces will translate to more trade for Africa, how this as well aligns with the African Union's 2063 agenda. We're also very keen to hear how the green channels for exports from the African continent will be expanded, and also how China will be helping with the African-led solutions to realize stability and security in the continent.
Karina, we appreciate that update from you. Karina Karibe, live at the Media Center as well today. Thank you. Kishore Mahbubani, a distinguished fellow at the Asia Research Institute at the National University of Singapore, says China's growth and development is an inspiring example for nations of the Global South.
Many countries in the Global South are asking themselves, what did China do right and what can we learn from China? And this is why, even though most Western countries have been very critical of China's development, and amazingly, they still don't think they need to learn anything from China's development. If you look at the countries of the Global South, who are much more modest, they actually believe that they can learn a lot from China. And unlike the West, they also understand that China, at the end of the day, is one of the most successful civilizations in human history, and they believe that they can learn a lot by coming to China. So I'm confident that China's growth and development will eventually have a positive effect on the Global South, because it will inspire many countries in the Global South to also try and emulate China's path. And if that results in a massive global reduction of poverty, if that results in massive growth in education and literacy, and if that results in much larger middle-class populations around the world, we could then say that the China's growth story has not just benefited China, but also benefited the countries of the Global South.
Now let's pick up my conversation with my guests here in the studio. Mr. Huang, coming to you now. We heard one of the guests earlier who said that it is actually China who has been playing the stabilizing force in this relationship, China and America. And if past experiences are any reference, we do see things calm down a little bit, stabilize a little bit after the two leaders meet. We're looking at possible meetings between the two leaders this year also. What are your expectations on how China-U.S. relations will develop in 2026?
I think that the first thing we have to realize that the both leaders, I mean President Trump and President Xi Jinping, has reached agreement that United States and China work with each other instead of against each other, benefit both. So based on that agreement, they really worked very hard to stabilize the bilateral relationship despite all the differences between the United States and China. That's why Donald Trump is very eager to come to Beijing, as shown by different occasions. In that regard, I think the two countries need to talk about three fundamental issues or space. The first is, of course, about political international order. We know that this order is very much damaged, or from Munich's perspective, is under destruction. I think it's the responsibility of China to play a central role in maintain and further improve this international order, just a rule-based order. The second, of course, we know that international trade mechanism is very much damaged or undermined by, United States tariff policy, and the two countries need to work on that because it matters not only because for the economic and the trade relationship between China and the United States, but for the entire international trade mechanism and architectures. Last but not least, of course, is for security and peace. We know we need peace and stability because that's a foundation or precondition for economic prosperity, which matters to all of us. I think the United States and China, especially China, has to play a very important role, sometimes a leading role, in maintain peace and stability given all these great uncertainties in terms of geopolitics in today's world.
These are absolutely significant areas for China and U.S. to address together. Mr. Zhao, what are the potential contention points this year between China and America? Will trade still be an issue? Will they talk about regional conflicts? What do you think are the areas that they could have both agreements and disagreements on?
Well, if looking from a bilateral perspective, of course, economic issue still stands out, and also technological competition, because export control is one of the most important concerns from the Chinese side. And the U.S. is intentionally tightening up the export control further. But from a global perspective, and also, as I stated, that now China, U.S., two biggest, largest economy in the world, have responsibility to maintain global peace and prosperity. And now the world is not peaceful. So I think, again, regional security, global security will probably take the lead for the nearest top leadership meetings for this time, because everybody is looking to an exit out of the current disorder or chaos in the world, and also the latest military conflict in the Middle East.
We still have a few minutes in before the press conference starts. I do want to get a question in about China-Europe ties. This is a region where China doesn't have a fundamental conflict of interest, yet the two sides have suffered from frictions when it comes to trade. For example, the export of Chinese items into Europe, including electric vehicles. But Mr. Zhao, we're also seeing that this year, many European leaders have come to China. And obviously they see this as an ideal timing and opportunity to improve on ties with China. Help understand the context to which this is happening.
Well, I think fundamentally, just now we mentioned the word hedging. I think that's exactly what the European leaders are doing right now, because before they wanted to rely on the U.S. to provide more security, and they're willing to sacrifice on economic front to keep the U.S. in Europe because they're still fighting a war in Ukraine. However, now they realize that the United States are wishing to take, for instance, Greenland. They have territorial sovereignty sort of aggression against the Europeans, and also NATO is no longer stable. It's possibly getting into a destruction. So now I think Europe is shifting back, normalizing relations with China, seeking more pragmatic relations with economically with China. The fundamental intention is basically hedging against the threat from the United States. And I think that's good, because that is serving the purpose of moving the world toward a more orderly, multinational, multipolar international system, which China is actually advocating.
Europe has been very pragmatic with its hedging strategy here. I want to get your take on this also.
I agree with Professor Zhao's point. I think I want to add that what really attracts European leaders are the stability and the certainty that China has exhibited in the past. First is very strong and consistent leadership and policy. Second is very stable, continuously developed economy, and last but not least, the policy has been also very consistent. So, of course, Europeans have some, negative thinking about China. That's not China's problem, that's their problem. But after all those problems just mentioned, especially the kind of destruction of transatlantic bridge, that is relationship between the United States and Europe, which is supposed to or used to be the foundation for the kind of Western world, but now is almost collapsed. due to the wrecking ball politics by the United States. Now they look east, look at China, they say stability, they say prosperity, and say the consistent policies are never change, of course, and also very effective and strong leadership. That's what you're looking for if you really want to develop economy and maintain stability and peace on earth. So I think that that's a foundation for European leaders to go east. Of course, I agree with Professor Charles, also hedging between the two superpowers. But I would argue, given what's happening between Europe and the United States, I think the hedging will be more and more lean towards China.
Thank you,
for
gentlemen.
pragmatic reasons.
Let's go straight to the media center. It looks like the press conference there is getting started. This is a press conference presided over by the Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi. He will be elaborating on China's diplomatic priorities this year. Journalists from home and abroad are taking part in the press conference. We look forward to hearing what type of questions will the foreign minister take and his answers as he sheds light on China's foreign policy and external relations.
Dear friends from the Chinese and foreign media, good morning. Welcome to this press conference for the fourth session of the 14th National People's Congress. Our topic today is China's foreign policy and diplomatic relations. We're delighted to have with us Mr. Wang Yi, member of the Political Bureau of the CPC Central Committee and Minister of Foreign Affairs, who will be taking your questions. Thank you. Friends from the media, good morning. I'm very pleased to meet you again. Today is the International Women's Day. Let me start by extending warm greetings to all women on this special day. I also want to take this opportunity to express sincere appreciation to friends from the media and people from various sectors of society for your interest in and support for China's diplomacy. In today's world, changes unseen in a century are unfolding at a faster pace. Transformation and turbulence are intertwined, and wars and conflicts keep flaring up. In today's China, we are forging ahead at full speed in building a great country. Our national rejuvenation is unstoppable, and our country's international influence is rising steadily. Under the strong leadership of the Central Committee of the Communist Party of China, with Communist Xi Jinping at its core, focusing on the central tasks of the party and the country, and following the guidance of Xi Jinping thought on diplomacy, China's diplomacy firmly safeguards state sovereignty, security and development interests, firmly upholds international rule of law and fairness and justice, firmly opposes all unilateral acts, power politics and bullying, firmly observes and fulfills our international obligations, and firmly stands on the right side of history. As the world's most important force for peace, for stability, and for justice, we have full confidence in the future of humanity. We stand ready to work with all like-minded countries to pursue the noble goal of building a community with a shared future for humanity and write new chapters of peace, development, and win-win cooperation for our times. With that, I'm ready to take your questions.
Now the floor is open to questions.
第一个问题，请中央广播电视总台康辉先生提问，谢谢。
谢谢主持人，王毅外长您好。中央广播电视总台央视记者提问：2025年对于中国特色大国外交来说是极不平凡的一年，而我们也注意到其中元首外交继续发挥着决定性的作用。您能否再具体介绍一下过去一年元首外交取得了哪些重要的成果？同时呢，我们也注意到2026年开年以来，习近平主席以多种形式同多国领导人保持着密切的沟通，所以也很关心在新的一年当中，中国的元首外交还会有哪些新的看点、新的重点？谢谢。
China Central Television. 2025 has been a most extraordinary year in China's diplomacy. Could you walk us through what was achieved in the decisive head of state diplomacy in the past year? And we've seen that since 2026, President Xi Jinping has been maintaining close communication with leaders of many countries. So what highlights can we expect this year?
Head of state diplomacy is the anchor of China's diplomacy. Navigating the international landscape over the past year, President Xi Jinping charted a course through rough waters with extensive head of state diplomacy, which was captured in a number of historic moments. President Xi had important meetings and carried out strategic communication with world leaders over the past year, pioneering new practices of dialogue and coordination between major countries. He visited Southeast Asia, Russia, Central Asia, and the Republic of Korea, building up the new momentum of good neighborliness and friendship. He hosted the Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit in Tianjin and the China CELAC Forum, gathering new impetus for the great unity of the Global South. He attended a series of commemorations of the 80th anniversary of the victory of the Chinese People's War of Resistance against Japanese aggression and the World Anti-Fascist War, sounding a new, powerful call for safeguarding peace and justice. Through head of state diplomacy over the past year, the international community has had a better understanding of, has been drawn closer to, and has had greater trust in and higher expectation of China. More and more countries have come to see that under the guidance and stewardship of President Xi, China's diplomacy provides the most needed stability and certainty to a world in turmoil and serves as an irreplaceable mainstay amid global turbulence. In particular, the series of important initiatives and propositions put forward by President Xi demonstrate exceptional strategic foresight and broad global vision. They point out the right way forward for the changes in the world unseen in the century. In 2026, President Xi will receive guests from around the world, host major diplomatic events such as the APEC Economic Leaders Meeting and the second China-Arab States Summit, and make several important visits abroad. These diplomatic engagements are bound to further advance China's relations with the world in a positive direction, open up new space for building a community with a shared future for humanity, and enable the Chinese nation to make new, greater contributions to world peace and development. Thank you.
中区第3排这位戴眼镜的男士。
俄罗斯卫星通讯社提问：中国多次声明反对蓄意侵犯他国主权和安全的行为。面对复杂国际形势，中俄两个大国如何才能对抗重塑国际法和全球贸易规则的企图？谢谢。
Sputnik News Agency. China has stated on many occasions its opposition to the deliberate infringement of other countries' sovereignty and security. Given the complex international situation, how will China and Russia, two major countries, counter the attempts to reshape international law and global trade rules?
This year marks the 30th anniversary of the China-Russia Strategic Partnership of Coordination and the 25th anniversary of the China-Russia Treaty of Good Neighborliness and Friendly Cooperation. In a fluid and turbulent world, China-Russia relationship has stood rock solid against all odds. How is that achieved? I think the main reason is that the China-Russia Strategic Partnership of Coordination has been based on equality, respect, and mutual benefit since day one. It embodies the essence of a new type of international relations and represents the direction of a new type of major country relations. China and Russia are strategically independent. We always respect each other's core interests, do not impose the agenda of one on the other, and keep to the principle of non-alliance, non-confrontation, and not targeting any third party. China and Russia share a high degree of political mutual trust. Working back to back lies at the heart of this relationship. And the strong strategic resilience enables it to defy any external instigation or pressure. China and Russia act in close coordination. In major international and regional affairs, China and Russia share the broadest strategic consensus and closest strategic coordination, including defending international rules and order that you asked about. Through 80 years of wind and rain, the post-World War II international order has once again come to a critical juncture. Last year, the heads of state of China and Russia attended the commemorations of the victory of the anti-fascist war in each other's countries. And the two sides issued 3 important joint statements on deepening comprehensive strategic coordination, cementing global strategic stability, and upholding the authority of international law. This has sent a clear message to the world about resolutely upholding the correct view of history on World War II, safeguarding the fruits of the victory of the war, and opposing unilateral bullying acts. 80 years ago, China and Russia together contributed to the building of the post-war order. Today, 80 years on, China and Russia together will add momentum to the advent of a multipolar world. Thank you.
谢谢，请大家继续提问。请南区第2排第2位女士，谢谢。
谢谢主持人，我是深圳卫视直新闻的记者。中方宣布，今年11月将在深圳举行亚太经合组织第33次领导人非正式会议。想请问王外长，您期待今年会议将达成哪些重要成果？您如何看待 APEC 对推动亚太合作的作用呢？谢谢。
Shenzhen Satellite TV. China has announced that the APEC Economic Leaders Meeting will be held in Shenzhen in November this year. What important outcomes will the meeting deliver, and how do you see the role of APEC in promoting Asia-Pacific cooperation?
This is a very timely question. This year is the APEC China year. We will host APEC for the 3rd time. From Shanghai in 2001 and Beijing in 2014, to Shenzhen this year. APEC in the past 25 years has experienced ups and downs in regional cooperation and witnessed China's unwavering commitment to growing together with the Asia-Pacific. To be a good host, China will focus on one central objective throughout the whole year. That is, to translate the goal of building an Asia-Pacific community into action and turn its blueprint into reality. Decades have passed since the concept of Asia-Pacific community was first put forward. The idea must not stay on paper or remain just a vision. We hope to find an answer in Shenzhen, an answer that delivers broad consensus, clear priorities, and workable steps, so that people in the region can associate with and get into action in building an Asia-Pacific community. Through intensive communication with all parties, we have decided on this year's APEC theme. That is, building an Asia-Pacific community to prosper together. APEC Shenzhen will focus on the 3 priorities of openness, innovation, and cooperation, and once again chart the course and rally strength for Asia-Pacific cooperation at the crossroads. We will construct the main pillars of an Asia-Pacific community, align different pathways toward the free trade area of the Asia-Pacific, make appropriate arrangements for regional connectivity, and vigorously promote the transformation toward digital, smart, and green development. Throughout the year, the Chinese side will host over 300 events in cities across the country, with the participation of multiple Chinese provinces and municipalities. All APEC member economies will have the opportunity to contribute. Shenzhen is an important window on China's reform and opening up, a brilliant showcase of socialism with Chinese characteristics, and a frontier of innovation in the Guangdong, Hong Kong, Macau Greater Bay Area. We stand ready to work with all sides to promote a restart from APEC Shenzhen toward the goal of an Asia-Pacific community. Thank you.
请大家继续提问。请中区第3排第2位女士，谢谢。
谢谢，我是凤凰卫视、凤凰网、凤凰秀的记者。我们注意到，近期呢，美国和以色列再次对伊朗发起军事打击。那目前冲突已经蔓延到整个的中东地区。想请问中方如何看待当前的伊朗局势？对于解决伊朗问题有什么主张？谢谢。
Phoenix TV. The US and Israel have again launched military strikes on Iran, and the conflict is spreading to the entire Middle East region. What is China's view on the Iran situation, and what solution does China propose?
This is an issue that everyone is concerned about. It is also the focal point in the current international situation. China's attitude is objective and impartial. We have stated our principled position on multiple occasions, which can be summarized into one key message, that is, to bring about ceasefire and end hostilities. Ancient Chinese wisdom warns that weapons are ominous tools and should not be used without discretion. Seeing the Middle East engulfed in flames, I want to say that this is a war that should not have happened. It is a war that does no one any good. The history of the Middle East tells the world time and again that force provides no solution. An armed conflict will only increase hatred and breed new crises. Once again, China calls for an immediate stop to military operations to avoid the spiraling escalation of the situation and prevent the conflict from spilling over and spreading. China is of the view that to find the right and proper solution to the issues relating to Iran and the Middle East, the following fundamental principles must be observed. First, respecting state sovereignty. Sovereignty is the cornerstone of the current international order. We believe that the sovereignty, security, and territorial integrity of Iran and all countries in the Gulf region should be respected and must not be violated. Second, rejecting the abuse of force. Might does not make right. The law of the jungle must not return and rule the world. Willful use of force does not prove one's strength. Civilians are innocent and should not be victimized. Third, non-interference in internal affairs. The people in the Middle East are the true master of the region. Middle Eastern affairs should be determined by regional countries independently. Plotting color revolution or seeking regime change will find no popular support. Fourth, promoting political settlement of hotspot issues. China always believes that peace is the most precious. All sides should return to the negotiating table as quickly as possible, resolve differences through equal dialogue, and make efforts for realizing common security. Fifth, major countries should play a constructive role and use their strength in goodwill. Another ancient Chinese adage reads, "When benevolence and justice are not practiced, the position of strength shifts." Major countries should act in the spirit of justice and righteousness and contribute more positive energy to peace and development of the Middle East. As a sincere friend and strategic partner, China stands ready to work with Middle Eastern countries to implement the Global Security Initiative and restore order to the Middle East, restore tranquility to the people, and restore peace to the world. Thank you.
请大家继续提问。南区第1排这位女士。
谢谢主持人，我是新加坡亚洲新闻台 CNA 记者。China proposed the Global Governance Initiative last year, alongside its participation in mechanisms such as the Shanghai Cooperation Organization and BRICS. Some observers interpret this as China signaling a desire to play a bigger role in global governance and see this as a direct response to Western-led policies and frameworks. How would you, Mr. Wang Yi, respond to that interpretation? And how does China address views that intensifying major power rivalries, including between China and the US, could further deepen global divisions? Thank you.
亚洲新闻台，去年中国提出了全球治理倡议。一些观察人士认为，中国提出该倡议以及参与上合组织、金砖国家等机制，表明中方希望在全球治理中发挥更大作用，直面西方主导的政策和机制。您对此有何回应？有观点认为，包括中美在内的大国竞争加剧，可能进一步加深全球分歧。您对此怎么看？
我愿向大家介绍一下。
Well, I will share with you in details the GGI proposed by President Xi Jinping. In today's world, challenges of a global nature keep emerging. The governance deficit becomes more prominent, and multilateralism is under severe shock. The Global Governance Initiative, GGI, put forward by President Xi Jinping could not be more timely and was quickly echoed by over 150 countries and international organizations. The UN Secretary-General commented on the spot that the core concepts of the GGI align closely with the values upheld by the UN. China then initiated the Group of Friends of Global Governance, which was launched successively at the UN headquarters in New York and its office in Geneva. Many countries, especially Global South countries, joined the group with great enthusiasm. Why is the GGI able to draw such widespread response? I believe the key lies in the 5 major principles advocated by the GGI, namely sovereign equality, international rule of law, multilateralism, a people-centered approach, and real actions. They meet the common expectations of the international community and reflect the shared aspirations of people from all countries. The most explicit message of the GGI is that the leading status of the UN must be upheld, not challenged. The central role of the UN must be strengthened, not weakened. The UN is not perfect, but without the UN, the world would only be worse. Creating parallel structures outside the UN, or worse still, putting together various exclusive blocs and circles, is unpopular and unsustainable. The most unequivocal requirement of the GGI is that the UN must keep pace with the times, improve its governance system through reform, and adapt to the evolving international situation and the changing dynamics in the global balance of power in the 21st century. In particular, it should increase the voice and representation of countries of the Global South and better reflect the legitimate demands of developing countries. The goal is to build a more just and equitable global governance system. China is a founding member of the UN and a staunch defender of its cause. As the largest developing country, China is more conscious of the ardent expectations of Global South countries. Both the Shanghai Cooperation Organization and the BRICS, which China took part in building, take abiding by the UN Charter as their primary guideline. And both are exploring and accumulating useful experience for reforming and improving global governance. China calls on more countries to participate in and support the GGI and work together to revitalize the UN, defend the UN, and make the UN stronger. Thank you.
继续提问，请北区第3排第1位男士。
Thank you. With CNN. Mr. Foreign Minister, as you know, since Donald Trump's return to the White House, U.S.-China relations have been tumultuous, so his planned visit to Beijing later this month has been highly anticipated. Given this, how will the ongoing U.S.-Israeli strikes on Iran affect this trip? And also, ahead of this trip, he seems to be pursuing a détente with China. Notably, he did not mention China directly even once in his latest State of the Union address. So there are concerns in Washington that he might make concessions to China on issues such as Taiwan during the visit because of his focus on reaching trade and commercial deals. How would you respond to this view, and what does China want out of this visit, and what are your expectations of bilateral ties after the visit? 所以，王院长您好，我是美国有线电视新闻网的记者。你也知道，特朗普总统重返白宫之后呢，美中两国关系是跌宕起伏，所以他本月底的访华是引起了全球的高度关注。那么现在美国和以色列联手对伊朗发起军事打击，这个会给他这次访华带来什么影响或变数吗？那么与此同时，在他访华前夕，他似乎寻求保持两国关系的一种缓和状态，包括在最新的国情咨文中是罕见的对中国是几乎只字未提。所以华盛顿就有人担心，他在访华期间会不会因为致力于要与中方达成经贸商业方面的协议，在其他问题上，包括台湾问题上对中方做出让步。所以您对此有何回应？那么中方对他的这次访华以及接下来两国关系的走向有什么判断和期望呢？谢谢。
你把我们翻译的工作都替代了。
You have done all interpreters' work.
而且提的问题很长。
And that's a long question.
这个
So
很长时间思考。
That's a well thought out one.
越来越多。
And
中美关系总是要回答的。
I would like to say that we should
中美关系牵动各方，影响
have an answer on China-U.S. relations because it is one of far-reaching and global implications. Turning our backs on each other would only lead to mutual misperception and miscalculation. Sliding into conflict or confrontation could drag the whole world down. China and the U.S. are both big countries. Neither side can remodel the other, but we can choose how we want to engage. That is, to commit to a spirit of mutual respect, to hold the bottom line of peaceful coexistence, and to strive for the prospect of win-win cooperation. That's what serves the interests of Chinese and American peoples, and that's also the expectation of the international community. It is heartening to see that the presidents of the two countries have led by example. By maintaining good interactions at the top level, they have provided important strategic safeguard for the China-U.S. relationship to improve and move forward. And they have brought the relationship back on an even keel after the ups and downs. This year is indeed a big year for China-U.S. relations. The agenda of high-level exchanges is already on the table. What the two sides need to do now is to make thorough preparations accordingly, create a suitable environment, manage the risks that do exist, and remove unnecessary disruptions. China is always committed and open. It is critical that the U.S. work in the same direction. I believe that when the two sides treat each other with sincerity and good faith, we will be able to lengthen the list of cooperation and shorten the list of problems. We will be able to, under the strategic guidance of the two presidents, produce results satisfactory to both peoples, achieve consensus welcomed by the whole world, and make 2026 a landmark year of sound, steady, and sustainable development of China-U.S. relations. Thank you.
请继续提问。请南区第二排这位巴基斯坦的记者提。
I represent Associated Press of Pakistan. China's neighborhood has not been tranquil last year as several countries experienced change of government and tension and dispute between regional countries were on the rise. How does China view the situation in the region, and what does China expect to achieve this year in its neighborhood diplomacy? Thank you.
巴基斯坦联合通讯社。 我们注意到，去年中国周边环境并不太平，多国政局出现变化，地区国家间矛盾争端有所增多。中方如何看待周边形势？对今年周边外交有何展望？
Neighbors helping neighbors and building an amicable neighborhood is part of Chinese tradition and culture. China always places the neighboring region in a priority position of its diplomatic agenda. President Xi Jinping has put forth the principle of amity, sincerity, mutual benefit, and inclusiveness for China's neighborhood diplomacy in a new era. Last year, the CPC Central Committee held the first conference on work related to neighboring countries, which set the goal of building a community with a shared future with neighboring countries. This shows that our understanding of and commitment to the neighboring region are deepening, and this is also welcomed and supported by the neighboring countries, including Pakistan. The world is entering a period of turbulence, but Asia has managed to maintain overall stability and rapid growth, contributing over 60% of global growth in the past year. This is no easy feat, but a result of the collective efforts of China and the neighboring countries. Surely, there are often political changes within countries in the region, and complex, sensitive issues left from history still exist between countries. But the underlying character of good neighborliness and friendship remains unchanged, and the prevailing trend of win-win cooperation remains unchanged. A key factor underpinning peace and stability in the region is China's steadfast commitment to the policy on fostering an amicable, secure, and prosperous neighborhood, to the principle of amity, sincerity, mutual benefit, and inclusiveness, to the vision of shared future for humanity, and to open regionalism and true multilateralism. Imagine this: should China act like some traditional powers bent on carving out spheres of influence, provoking camp-based rivalry, and even adopting a bigger-than-ever approach, would Asia still be as stable as it is today? Would the international community still be able to benefit from the development opportunities of Asia? Facts show that China is always an anchor for regional security, an engine for development and prosperity, and a champion of the shared values of Asian countries. We are happy and proud to play this role, and we stand ready to step up such efforts in the future. Thank you.
谢谢，请提下一个问题。请北区第5排第1位女士，谢谢。是的。
谢谢主持人，外长您好。中国新闻社、中国新闻网记者提问：随着越来越多中国企业和公民走出去，中国的海外利益日益拓展，外交为民的责任也更重了。外长能否介绍外交部将如何更好保护海外中国公民和企业的合法权益？谢谢。
China News Service. As more Chinese enterprises go global and more citizens travel abroad, Chinese interests overseas are growing, which means greater responsibility of serving the people through diplomacy. How will the Foreign Ministry better protect the legitimate rights and interests of Chinese people and businesses overseas?
Serving the people is the abiding mission of the diplomatic work of the People's Republic of China. And strengthening the system of safety protection for Chinese nationals and interests overseas is the unremitting pursuit of the Chinese Foreign Service in a new era. A few figures for you. In the past year, we dealt with more than 100 major emergencies involving Chinese nationals and institutions overseas. We processed over 79,000 cases in which consular protection and assistance are needed. We handled over 600,000 phone calls via the 12308 consular hotline. We issued over 3,000 overseas security alerts. We secured the release of more than 50 Chinese compatriots kidnapped in Africa, and we worked with neighboring countries to crack down on online gambling and telecom fraud. bringing back tens of thousands of individuals. In the past year, we firmly protected the legitimate and lawful rights and interests of Chinese companies abroad, and we urged governments of host countries to protect the safety of Chinese personnel and projects. At the same time, we resolutely countered unwarranted suppression targeting Chinese companies and helped them strengthen risk preparedness and the ability to defend their interests through legal means. Our diplomats are posted everywhere in the globe, and they have a strong sense of mission. Some of them are stationed for years in regions affected by conflicts and turmoil. Some are exposed to a high risk of diseases every day. And some even work and live in modified shipping containers or at high altitudes with severely thin air. But they fulfill their duties with no complaint or regret. As we speak, our embassies and consulates in Iran and other Gulf states are working hard to ensure the evacuation and safety of Chinese. Let me put it this way. Where there is the Chinese flag flying, there are Chinese diplomats on duty. Where there is want or need from Chinese compatriots, there is heartwarming care of the party and the government. I want to say this to all fellow Chinese abroad. While you may be facing a world of chaos and turbulence, you have behind you a motherland as firm as a rock. We will, as always, put our people first, further strengthen overseas security protection capabilities, and build a security risk prevention system that covers the entire globe. Thank you.
请大家继续提问。请南区第3排第2位女士，谢谢。
谢谢，外长您好，中国日报记者提问。我的问题关于全球南方，在国际秩序遭遇危机之际，全球南方国家面临严峻挑战。您如何看待全球南方国家在全球治理改革体系中的隐隐作用？同时，我们也看到今年以来国际形势出现了重大变化，单边主义和强权法则抬头，请问如何才能实现中方一直所倡导的全球南方的团结自强？谢谢。
China Daily. With crisis in the international order, the Global South faces severe challenges. How do you see the leading role of Global South countries in the reform of the global governance system? And in a year marked by major transformation in the international landscape, the rise of unilateralism and the law of the strongest, how can the Global South realize the strength through unity that China has been promoting?
The collective rise of the Global South is the distinct hallmark of the great transformation unfolding in the world. Over the past 40 years, its share of global economy has grown from 24% to over 40%. It has become a key driver of multipolarity in the world. Right now, hegemonism and power politics are asserting themselves and dealing a heavy blow to the international order. The Global South countries should increase communication and coordination, jointly defend our legitimate rights and interests, and work together to expand the space for independent development. The Global South is an emerging positive force for good on the international stage. In a changing and more turbulent world, we should forge greater confidence and unity, pull together, and jointly champion peace, development, cooperation, and win-win outcomes. We should make good use of important platforms such as the BRICS, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, and the Group of 77 and China to speak up for peace and empower development. Multilateralism is vital for Global South countries. We should encourage the international community to practice true multilateralism and uphold the UN-centered international system and the international order based on international law. We must always ensure that world affairs are discussed and handled by all nations and international rules formulated by all countries. The Global South needs an open and cooperative international environment for development. We should advocate a universally beneficial and inclusive economic globalization, foster an open world economy, firmly uphold the multilateral trading system, and promote openness to share opportunities and achieve win-win outcomes. China's heart is with the Global South. China's root is in the Global South. We are ready to join hands with other Global South countries to journey on toward modernization and advance the building of a community with a shared future for humanity.
提问。中区第二排这位穿黄色衣服的女士。
Good morning, Efe from Spain. Mr. Minister, the return of Trump has forced Europe to reassess its reluctance towards China, and during the last few months, several European leaders have visited Beijing. So, what mistakes and what positive steps does China believe Europe is making in this rapprochement? And does China see this as a sign of a greater strategic autonomy from Europe? Thank you.
埃菲社，特朗普回归迫使欧洲重新审视此前对华消极的立场。近几个月，多位欧洲领导人访华。中方认为，欧方在改善对华关系的过程中采取了哪些积极举措，有哪些举动是错误的？中方是否将欧方接连访华视为欧洲增强战略自主的表现？
其实我们看到去年以来。
Indeed, since last year, relations between China and European countries have been regaining strength. Two-way trade topped $1 trillion. Over 2 million European tourists traveled here under visa-free policies. And on top of that, European leaders paid a number of visits. Interactions are getting closer. A host of new cooperation agreements have been reached. Facts have shown that China-Europe relations draw stability from shared interests and certainty from mutually beneficial partnerships. China has a clear stance on developing relations with Europe. We consistently believe that Europe should naturally be a pole in the multipolar world, that Europe is an important force underpinning the stability of the international order, and that Europe is a key partner for China in our modernization. For China-Europe relations to stay steady and sound, it is crucial for Europe to have a correct perception of China. We are witnessing a growing consensus among wise minds in Europe that China is not a competitor, but a global partner. This is especially true among young people. They are looking at China in a more objective and positive way. In trade and economic ties, China and Europe are mutually complementary. A dynamic balance is entirely within reach amid growing ties. As testified by the facts in China-Europe cooperation, interdependence is not a risk. Intertwined interests are not threats. And openness and cooperation will not weaken economic security. But building walls and barriers will only lead to self-isolation. We're glad to see European friends stepping out of the small attic of protectionism and walking into the fitness club of the Chinese market to build their strength and competitiveness. Thank you.
谢谢，请大家继续提问。请中区第4排第2位女士，谢谢。
谢谢主持人。外长您好，总台 CGTN 记者提问。众所周知呢，当前巴以冲突延宕，同时呢，我们也看到加沙的停火脆弱。美国提出来建设所谓和平委员会，来解决加沙问题，还有战后的安排。想请教您，中国如何推动巴勒斯坦问题的真正解决？谢谢您。
CGTN. The Palestinian-Israeli conflict has not come to an end, and the ceasefire in Gaza is fragile. The U.S. has created a board of peace to deal with the Gaza issue and post-war arrangements. How will China promote the true resolution of the Palestinian question?
The situation in Gaza tests the very foundation of international justice. The international efforts that enabled the ceasefire are welcome, but hard work still lies ahead to consolidate the ceasefire, advance reconstruction, and find a comprehensive and lasting solution to the question of Palestine. There is only one equitable and widely recognized solution to the Palestinian question, which is the two-state solution. Any other arrangement or new mechanisms must reinforce rather than undermine the two-state solution. The international community should not allow the Palestinian question to be marginalized again. The UN has a greater responsibility to play a lead role in driving the process. Turmoil and war need not be the fate of the Palestinian people. Like people elsewhere, they have a legitimate right to be free from war and to enjoy peace and development. As a responsible major country, China will continue to support Palestine's just cause of pursuing legitimate national rights and facilitate international efforts to restore justice to the Palestinian people. Thank you.
谢谢，请大家继续提问。请北区第一排第4位男士。
Thank you, NBC. Respected Minister Wang Yi, you have spoken of China-U.S. ties as most consequential relationship over time, with strategic choices that will shape world history. So, given all the happenings, would China accept the J2 format cited by some, including President Trump himself, as a framework for China and the U.S. to shoulder joint responsibility in addressing global challenges? If not, what alternative framework would you propose that will prevent confrontation with the United States and assure the world that China's rise is not aimed at overturning the existing international system? Thank you.
美国全国广播公司，您曾表示，中美关系是当今世界最重要的双边关系之一。中美两国的战略选择影响世界历史的演进方向。中方是否接受包括特朗普总统本人在内的人提出中美共治的框架，共担责任，应对全球性挑战？如果不接受，中方将提出何种替代方案来避免中美对抗，并且让世界确信崛起后的中国无意推翻当前国际体系。
There is no doubt that China and the US have a significant impact on the world, but we should not forget there are more than 190 countries on our planet. World history has always been written by many countries together, and the future of humanity will be forged through the collective efforts of all nations. Diversity is the inherent nature of human society. And multipolarity is what the international landscape should look like. Looking back in history, great power rivalry and bloc confrontation have invariably inflicted disaster and pain on humanity. Therefore, China will never take the beaten path of seeking hegemony as its strength grows, nor do we subscribe to the logic that the world can be run by major countries. China has inscribed in its constitution that it follows an independent foreign policy and is committed to pursuing a path of peaceful development. Chinese leaders have often declared to the world that no matter how the international situation evolves and how strong China becomes, it will never seek hegemony or expansion. As for how the international landscape should evolve, China's proposal is to build an equal and orderly multipolar world. Equal means every nation, regardless of size or strength, is an equal member of the international community and can find its place and play its role in a multipolar world. Orderly means all countries should uphold the widely recognized international rules, namely the purposes and principles of the UN Charter and the basic norms of international relations. Building an equal and orderly multipolar world should be the common responsibility of all countries. With more resources and capabilities, major countries should be more generous, shoulder more responsibilities, and set an example of observing rules, honoring commitments, and upholding international law. China will continue to play a constructive role in reforming global governance and work with all countries toward a multipolar world. Thank you.
请大家继续提问。中区第一排这位男士。
大家好，我叫Mauro with 真实巴西。Good morning, Mr. Minister. I'm Mauro from Brasil de Fato. So the national security strategy of the U.S. launched last year makes evident that the U.S. priority is to interfere in China-Latin America relations by pressuring Latin American countries, trying to cut economic and other ties between the two parts. Some analysis also indicate that the U.S. is also covertly sabotaging port operations and oil trade of China in Latin America. How will China respond to this challenge that threatens the possibility of bringing to a new level the China and Latin America and the Caribbean relations as exposed in China's policy paper on Latin America and the Caribbean released last year? Thank you very much. 谢谢。
真实巴西媒体集团。美国去年发布的国家安全战略报告清楚表明，美国的优先事项是通过施压拉美国家切断中拉经济和其他联系，来干预中拉关系。还有一些分析指出，美国正在暗中破坏中国在拉美的港口运营和石油贸易。中方去年发布中国对拉丁美洲和加勒比政策文件，提出推动中拉关系再上新台阶。而美方上述政策和做法显然对此构成挑战，中方将如何应对？
Well, you are most welcome, friends and media from the Latin American countries. Old scripts from the 19th century shouldn't be acted out on the international stage of the 21st. The resources of Latin America and the Caribbean LAC belong to the people there. The path of LAC countries should be chosen by their people, and the choice of friends is a decision for LAC countries alone. China-LAC cooperation is about the mutual help and support between Global South countries. Looking back, China-LAC relations grew significantly over the past 50-plus years. The key lies in the fact that China always respects Latin American people and commits to equal treatment and mutual benefit with LAC countries. We never engage in geopolitical schemes, nor interfere in other countries' internal affairs, nor ask others to pick sides. At last year's ministerial meeting of the China CELAC Forum, we jointly launched 5 programs for solidarity, development, civilization, peace, and people-to-people bonds, drawing a blueprint for China and LAC countries' joint march toward modernization. I would like to emphasize that cooperation between China and LAC countries does not target any third party and should not be subject to interference by any third party. We have great confidence in the future of China-LAC relations. No matter how the situation evolves, China stands ready to work with LAC countries toward building a China-LAC community with a shared future and spreading the benefits of our comprehensive cooperative partnership to more people on both sides. Thank you.
请大家继续提问。请南区第一排第4位男士，谢谢。
谢谢主持人。外长您好，新华社记者提问：“十五规划建议提出要坚持高质量发展，推动经济持续健康发展和社会全面进步。请问外交部在紧密围绕十五规划服务以高质量发展推进中国现代化建设方面有哪些创新举措？”谢谢。
Xinhua News Agency. The recommendations for the 15th Five-Year Plan for Economic and Social Development underline the need to pursue high-quality development and drive sustained, sound economic development and all-around social progress. What new measures will the Foreign Ministry take in connection to the 15th Five-Year Plan to contribute to the advancement of Chinese modernization through high-quality development?
The 15th Five-Year Plan offers a new blueprint for China's development and a new vision of win-win cooperation with the rest of the world. This is the first year of its implementation. China's diplomatic service will actively coordinate resources at our disposal to create a more favorable international environment for China's high-quality development and modernization. There are 3 priorities. First, we will continue to be an enabler of high-standard opening up, leveraging high-level exchanges and major diplomatic events. We will continue to facilitate high-quality development of the Belt and Road Initiative, expand the network of high-standard free trade areas, keep industrial and supply chains stable and smooth, and secure a fair, open, and non-discriminatory environment for Chinese companies operating abroad. Second, we will continue to expand the fast track for people-to-people exchanges. To date, we have granted unilateral visa exemption to 50 countries and made mutual visa-free entry arrangements with 29 countries. Last year, as many as 73% of visitors came visa-free. Going forward, we will continue to refine cross-border travel policies, further leverage the benefits of visa-free entry, and upgrade support services. The goal is to both make it more convenient and comfortable for foreigners to travel and live in China, and make it safer and smoother for Chinese citizens to travel abroad. Third, we will continue to open new windows of connectivity. We will innovate and upgrade the program of Beyond the Capital diplomatic tour, and speed up the building of an information platform for high-quality development envisioned by the 15th Five-Year Plan. These efforts will help China's subnational entities better access global resources, share governance experience, and expand international cooperation. In this way, the diplomatic service will be able to better empower development across the country.
中区第4排那位尼日利亚记者。
Mr. Minister, my name is Fortune Abang from the News Agency of Nigeria. This year marks the 70th anniversary of diplomatic relations between China and Africa. This year is also designated as the China-Africa Year of People-to-People Exchange. In this year of special significance, how do you expect China-Africa relations to further grow and deliver for the people of these 2 parties? Thank you.
尼日利亚通讯社，今年是中非开启外交关系70周年，也是中非人文交流年。在这个特殊年份，中非关系会有哪些新发展、新亮点？
欢迎非洲的朋友们提问。
Warmest welcome to you. journalist from Africa. For 70 years, China-Africa friendship had stood the test of changing international circumstances and shown strong vitality. For 36 years, China's foreign minister has kicked off the year with a visit to Africa. This is a diplomatic tradition that has been honored rain or shine. And this consistency reflects the spirit and commitment of China's diplomacy. During my visit to Ethiopia early this year, people fondly recalled the touching scenes of Premier Zhou Enlai's visit to Africa. Then in Tanzania, people still cherished the memory of Chinese assistance in building the Tazara Railway. And many young Chinese engineers and workers who laid down their lives for it and would never make it home. It's no exaggeration to say that China-Africa friendship has been passed down from generation to generation, forged heart to heart, and built with sweat and blood. In this new era, President Xi Jinping deeply values the bond with China. He emphasizes sincerity, real results, amity, and good faith in working with Africa, always reminding us of our friendship and shared interests with the continent. This approach has helped to take China-Africa cooperation to new heights. We're just 2 months into 2026, and already President Xi has sent 3 letters or messages to our African brothers and sisters. Namely, a letter of congratulation on the launch of the China-Africa Year of People-to-People Exchanges, a reply to veterans of Zimbabwe's liberation struggle, and a congratulatory message to the African Union Summit for the 14th year running. It's clear from these messages that China's top leader wants the torch of China-Africa friendship to be passed from generation to generation, and Africa can count on China's steadfast support for its development and revitalization. This year, China-Africa relations will see many new developments, 3 of which I'd like to draw your attention to. First, fresh steps in building the China-Africa community with a shared future. We will host multiple African leaders to strengthen mutual support as all-weather partners, and we will write a new chapter of our shared journey together. Second, full implementation of zero-tariff access to 100% of African imports as from May the 1st. As part of China's commitment to high-standard opening up, we are removing tariffs completely to boost trade, to multiply benefits for the people, and to help Africa access the enormous opportunities of the Chinese market. Third, the nearly 600 exciting events to take place under the China-Africa Year of People-to-People Exchanges. We are always ready to work with our African brothers and sisters to draw inspiration from our civilizational heritages, forge a stronger bond between our people, and carry forward our friendship for many, many generations to come.
请中区第2排第2位女士，谢谢。
谢谢主持人，王外长您好，人民日报记者提问，请问王外长，面对逆全球化抬头，中国将如何抵制保护主义，同世界更好分享发展机遇，引领全球经济持续稳定增长？谢谢。
People's Daily, faced with the backlash against globalization, how will China resist protectionism, better share opportunities with the world, and lead the sustained and steady growth of the world economy?
The world economy is facing headwinds, and globalization is suffering a backlash. We're seeing that a certain country is erecting tariff barriers and pushing economic and technological decoupling. This is no different from using kindling to put out a fire. You will only get burned. President Xi has reminded everybody that it's impossible to channel the vast ocean of the global economy back into isolated lakes. It just runs counter to the tide of history. Pursuing protectionism is akin to locking oneself in a dark room. It may keep out wind and rain, but it also shuts out light and air. The problems facing economic globalization can only be addressed through more sustainable development and more equitable and effective governance. To this end, President Xi has called for promoting an economic globalization that is universally beneficial and inclusive. The goal is to make the pie of economic globalization bigger and, more importantly, divide it more fairly. The principle is to leave no country behind and halt the widening wealth gap. The pathway is to encourage countries to draw on each other's strengths and share opportunities through economic openness, and pursue common development and mutual success through convergent interests. China not only talks the talk, but walks the walk. Over the past 5 years, its economy has grown at an average annual rate of 5.4%, accounting for around 30% of global growth, greater than the contribution of the G7 combined. Looking ahead, China is the world's largest potential consumer market and the biggest emerging economy, underpinned by better conditions supporting a positive long-term outlook and a stronger trend of sustainable growth. China will remain the most stable engine of the global economy. A country's greatness lies in serving the greater good. China will expand high standard opening up, not only as the world's factory, but also the world's market. China is strongly committed to supporting trade and investment liberalization and facilitation, keeping global industry and supply chains stable and smooth, upholding the WTO-centered multilateral trading system, and defending a fair and open economic and trade order. The world can count on China to deliver new contributions to strong and sustainable global growth. Thank you.
继续提问。北区第2排第3位记者。
谢谢。共同社的记者提问：去年11月，中方曾对日本首相高市早苗的涉台言论提出强烈抗议。当前中日关系面临挑战，各方面交流合作也受到影响。今年2月，高市首相赢得大选后，日本政府表示始终敞开对话窗口。请问中方对今年中日关系的发展有何期待？谢谢。
Kyoto News. Last November, China protested strongly against Japanese Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi's remarks concerning Taiwan. China-Japan relations currently face challenges affecting exchanges and cooperation in various fields. After Prime Minister Takaichi won the general election last month, the Japanese government said it remains open to dialogue. What expectations does China have for its relations with Japan this year?
The future of China-Japan relations hinges on Japan's choice. Last year marked the 80th anniversary of the victory of the Chinese People's War of Resistance against Japanese aggression. In such a special year, Japan should have deeply repented of the wrong path it chose, including its brutal invasion and colonization of Taiwan. Yet, the current Japanese leader claimed that a Taiwan contingency could constitute a survival threatening situation for Japan, that under which Japan may exercise its so-called right of collective self-defense. It's well known that the right of self-defense shall be invoked only when a country has come under armed attack. One would ask, since Taiwan affairs are purely China's internal affairs, what gives Japan the right to interfere? Why is Japan entitled to invoke self-defense if anything happens in China's Taiwan region? Is exercising the right of collective self-defense simply a way to hollow out Japan's pacifist constitution, which renounces the right of belligerency? Given that Japanese militarists had used survival-threatening situation as the pretext for launching aggression, such rhetoric can only make the people in China and the rest of Asia alert and deeply worried. Where exactly is Japan headed? This year also marks another significant 80th anniversary, that of the opening of the Tokyo trials. 80 years ago, judges from 11 countries commenced proceedings that would span 2.5 years. They reviewed a mountain of irrefutable evidence and laid bare the innumerable crimes of Japanese militarists. The Tokyo trials, a litmus test of humanity's conscience, delivered historical justice. 80 years on today, Japan is given another opportunity for serious soul-searching. As Chinese adages remind us, history is a mirror that reflects the rise and fall of human affairs, and the past, if not forgotten, can serve as a guide for the future. We hope the Japanese people will keep their eyes wide open and never allow anyone foolish enough to tread the same disastrous path today. A strong China with 1.4 billion people will never allow anyone to justify colonialism or reverse history's verdict on aggression. Thank you.
大家继续提问，请南区第3排这位女士。
Good morning. Question from Antara Indonesia National News Agency. So, with the resuming of Philippines as the chairmanship in ASEAN 2026, how does China view the prospect for a more concrete consolidation or negotiation regarding code of conduct in South China Sea with the ASEAN member countries? Thank you very much.
印尼安塔拉通讯社，菲律宾已接任2026年东盟轮值主席国，中方如何看待与东盟国家磋商达成实质性有约束力的南海行为准则的前景？
The South China Sea is home to the world's busiest, safest, and freest shipping lanes. Over the past year, cooperation in the South China Sea has kept a sound momentum. China had in-depth discussions with Indonesia on joint maritime development. China held bilateral dialogue with Malaysia on maritime issues and carried out cooperation with Vietnam on sustainable fisheries development. Just recently, Chinese Coast Guard successfully rescued over a dozen Filipino crewmen distressed at sea. All these are ample proof that peace, cooperation, and friendship should be the new narrative of the South China Sea. Making waves wins no hearts, and fomenting trouble finds no takers. Yet lasting peace and stability requires solid institutional support. As we continue with the full and effective implementation of the Declaration on the Conduct of Parties in the South China Sea, consultation on a Code of Conduct in the South China Sea, COC, as you mentioned, has reached crunch time. All relevant parties look forward to wrapping it up this year. Together with the parties, China has the confidence and the resolve to remove interference, bridge differences, expand common ground, and reach an agreement as soon as possible. The COC will provide the golden rules for the parties to effectively manage differences, build trust, and advance cooperation. We also hope that as this year's ASEAN chair, the Philippines will recognize and fulfill its responsibility, resist the pull of self-interest, and play a positive role for peace and stability in the region. Thank you.
请大家继续提问。请中区 第6排这位男士。
你好, Mr. Minister. India-China relations are now looking up and on the course of normalization. India is also set to host BRICS Summit this year. And how does China view where the relations currently stand and look at their progress and their future trajectory in the current state of very volatile global situation? Thank you.
印中关系如今步入正常化轨道，今年印度担任金砖主席国，中方如何看待两国关系的现状、改善进展和未来走向？
确实，去年8月，习近平主席同莫迪
In
总理在
August
天津举行了成功的。
last year, President Xi Jinping and Prime Minister Narendra Modi had a successful meeting in Tianjin. Building on the fresh start enabled by the Akasa meeting in 2024, it brought about further improvement in China-India relations. Both sides are earnestly implementing the important understandings of our leaders. We are heartened to see re-energized interactions at all levels, a new record in bilateral trade, and closer people-to-people exchanges. All this has brought tangible benefits to the two peoples. As each other's important neighbors and members of the Global South, China and India enjoy profound civilizational ties and share extensive common interests. Mutual trust and cooperation is beneficial to the development of the two countries, while division and confrontation is detrimental to the rejuvenation of Asia. The two sides should follow the direction set by our leaders, remove interference, and advance toward the same goals. First, we must maintain the correct strategic perception of each other as partner rather than rival, an opportunity instead of threat. Second, we must uphold good neighborliness and friendship, and jointly safeguard peace and stability in the border areas. Third, we must focus on development, which is the biggest common denominator of our two countries, and produce more visible outcomes of practical cooperation. Fourth, we must step up to the plate and support each other's BRICS presidency over the next 2 years. So that together we can make BRICS cooperation more substantive and bring new hope to the Global South. Thank you.
请提下一个问题。请北区第1排第2位女士，谢谢。
谢谢主持人。中评社记者提问：外长您好，我们注意到近段时间以来，赖清德当局反复地声称台湾是主权独立的国家，台湾问题不是中国内政。同时，我们也看到台湾问题和台海局势，不断的升温，解放军的这个台海军演也越来越靠近台湾。所以想请问外长，您如何评估在台海发生这个就是擦枪走火的这样的一个风险，以及中方是否设定了这个两岸统一的时间表和路线图？谢谢。
China Review News Agency. The Laiqingte authorities have been claiming that Taiwan is a sovereign independent country and that the Taiwan question is not China's internal affairs. The Taiwan question and the cross-strait situation have become more heated, and the PLA's drills are getting closer to the island. What do you make of the risk of conflict breaking out in the region, and does China have a timetable and roadmap for reunification?
Taiwan has been an integral part of China since ancient times. It never was, is not, and never will be a country. Its return to China is a victorious outcome of the Chinese people's war of resistance against Japanese aggression and the Second World War. Its status has been definitively fixed by a series of international legal instruments, including the Cairo Declaration, the Potsdam Proclamation, Japan's Instrument of Surrender, and the Resolution 2758 of the UN General Assembly. Any attempt to create two Chinas or one China, one Taiwan is doomed to fail. The DPP authorities' obstinate pursuit of their separatist agenda is the root cause, undermining peace and stability across the Taiwan Strait. It has been proven time and again that the more the international community stands against Taiwan independence and upholds the one China principle, the more assured peace and stability will be across the Taiwan Strait. The Taiwan question is China's internal affair. It is at the core of China's core interests, a red line that must not be crossed or trampled on. Taiwan was recovered by China over 80 years ago, and we will never allow any individual or force to separate it from China again. The One China principle has overwhelming support in the international community. More and more countries are standing with China, not only reaffirming their commitment to the One China principle and recognizing Taiwan as part of China, but also taking a clear stand against all activities for Taiwan independence and supporting the cause of China's reunification. This is irrefutable proof that opposing Taiwan independence and promoting China's reunification is the trend of the times and meets the expectation of the international community. Resolving the Taiwan question and realizing the complete reunification of our motherland is a historic process that cannot be stopped. Those who support it are on the right side of history, and those who defy it shall perish. In the interest of time, we will have one last question.
请中区第一排第3位女士，谢谢。
谢谢主持人，王外长您好，环球时报记者提问：当前形势下，全球矛盾冲突日益尖锐，竞争对抗愈演愈烈，中国外交为什么要以构建人类命运共同体为目标呢？谢谢。
Global times. The world is embroiled in more conflicts and intensifying competition and confrontation. Why has China decided to pursue the foreign policy goal of building a community with a shared future for humanity?
You're right in saying that humanity finds itself in an era fraught with challenges. Throughout history, even in the darkest times, there have always been those who never stopped chasing ideals and light. President Xi Jinping is such a pioneer. With the foresight and the compassion of a leader at the helm of a major country, President Xi answered the big question of where humanity is headed by proposing to build a community with a shared future for humanity. His message is clear. Our enemies are not each other. They are war, poverty, hunger, and injustice. We cannot defeat them by fighting alone or looking after only ourselves. Instead, we must rally the world and build a common future. Alone, one is helpless. United, we can have great strength. The truth and value of this vision are sinking in with people around the world. It is like a beacon lighting the way forward for humanity. This vision encapsulates how China sees its role in the world and in history as a major country. The Chinese have always had a noble tradition of acting for the common good and pursuing harmony for all. Our great rejuvenation as a nation and our rise as a country of 1.4 billion people will not follow the beaten track where big powers vied for supremacy and territory. On the contrary, we will take a path of peaceful development, and we encourage other countries to take the same path. Together, we can build an open, inclusive, clean, and beautiful world that enjoys lasting peace, universal security, and shared prosperity. We are encouraged by the growing support for this vision. More than 100 countries and international organizations have embraced it, and nearly 80% of people around the world are in favor. Over 40 countries and regional organizations have joined us in realizing this vision. This attests to the saying that right makes might. A righteous cause is sure to garner mighty support of world's countries and pull the strength of the people. The future of humanity is bright, but it will not dawn on its own. Building a community with a shared future for humanity is both a beautiful vision and a historic process. It requires the united efforts of many generations. China will press ahead with conviction and concrete steps and work with any and all to make it a reality. Thank you.
中外记者朋友们，今天的记者会到此结束，谢谢王毅外长，谢谢大家，再见。
The press conference now concludes. Thank you.
A quite informative press conference by the Chinese foreign minister. And as you saw just now, a packed room of reporters from domestic and international media with a wide spectrum of questions on China's diplomatic policies, everything from China-US, China-Europe relations to the Global Governance Initiative to the rise of Global South countries and also to China's neighborhood policies. Let's pick the brain of my guests here in the studio, Professor Huang and Mr. Zhao. Professor Huang, starting with you now, what is your overall impression of what was covered in that press conference?
I think several points. First is a head of state diplomacy, which anchors China's foreign policy and foreign relations. That is a very important point. Secondly, is a multilateralism being mentioned again and again. Based on that is China's openness, equality, and mutual respect, which for peace and stability. Last but not the least, China always shows a very, very great confidence and look into future that China is going to play a major power role or called major power responsibility for peace and stability. All of that, I think, has showed to the world that China is a positive, peaceful, and of course, constructive power. Of course, I want to mention last but not the least, the Minister Wang Yi repeated quite a few times that China will never ever seek hegemony like the other major power did.
I think before the press conference, I think you mentioned a very important keyword, and that is consistency. Yeah. When you're looking for a partner, you want that consistency. And when China tells the rest of the world what its diplomatic policies are, there is still consistency in there as well. Yeah. Being open, being respectful, being mutually beneficial to each other. I think that's a value that China has always upheld. Mr. Zhao, what is your overall impression here?
Well, if you remember last year, after the press conference, we summarized the central idea or central conception is stability. When Trump 2.0 started and the world is falling again into chaos and into a lot of disruptions, China played a key role as an anchor or a host of stability. And I think the world now sees the value of stability in China. And this year, I think if I can summarize the press conference, I want to use the word back to order. I think the order has been disrupted or even destroyed, under destruction in a way. And I think China is championing the effort to restore order, to move back to order, and firmly against any effort to say might is right or jungle rule. And China has denied or fight back against that and calling on other countries to work with China together to maintain multilateral and multipolar world and make sure that small countries are not bullied and other part of the world, I mean, normal cooperations, economic cooperation will not be disrupted by other powers. So I think this is the central message, and other particular issues around this core idea that China is upholding, is playing its responsibility and its role in today's world.
All right, gentlemen, do bear with me here. We're going to take a look back at that press conference by Foreign Minister Wang Yi, who says that head of state diplomacy is the anchor of China's diplomacy. He also says that China's diplomatic efforts have become an irreplaceable mainstay in a turbulent world.
Navigating the international landscape over the past year, President Xi Jinping charted a course through rough waters with extensive head of state diplomacy, which was captured in a number of historic moments. President Xi had important meetings and carried out strategic communication with world leaders over the past year, pioneering new practices of dialogue and coordination between major countries. He visited Southeast Asia, Russia, Central Asia, and the Republic of Korea, building up the new momentum of good neighborliness and friendship. He hosted the Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit in Tianjin and the China CELAC Forum, gathering new impetus for the great unity of the Global South. He attended a series of commemorations of the 80th anniversary of the victory of the Chinese People's War of Resistance against Japanese aggression and the World Anti-Fascist War, sounding a new, powerful call for safeguarding peace and justice. More and more countries have come to see that under the guidance and the stewardship of President Xi, China's diplomacy provides the most needed stability and certainty to a world in turmoil and serves as an irreplaceable mainstay amid global turbulence. In particular, the series of important initiatives and propositions put forward by President Xi demonstrate exceptional strategic foresight and broad global vision. They point out the right way forward for the changes in the world unseen in the century. These diplomatic engagements are bound to further advance China's relations with the world in a positive direction, open up new space for building a community with a shared future for humanity, and enable the Chinese nation to make new, greater contributions to world peace and development.
Well, let's talk about this with my guests here in the studio. Mr. Zhao, coming to you now. Professor Huang mentioned head of diplomacy as the anchor for China's foreign diplomacies, and the foreign ministry laid out achievements last year. Many opportunities this year for that to play a big role also, because we have the APEC meeting coming up. We have the China-Arab States summit coming up. We have overseas trips of the Chinese president expected this year also. What is your expectation of head of state diplomacy playing a role in maintaining that stability you mentioned just now that the world needs so badly at this moment?
I think head of state diplomacy is getting more and more important by the day. Because today, as you see, that the world is falling into chaotic situation. Other countries are seeking stability, and China is the voice. However, head of state diplomacy set the tone, the direction, and continue to provide guidance for bilateral, multilateral relations moving forward. And particularly for China, President Xi provided this authoritative voice to the world and lay out China's position and view on specific issues, be it in the Middle East, Southeast Asia, China's neighborhood, or China's relations with other major powers, or with Europe, with Russia. So I think this year, in particular, we will have more diplomatic major events, including what you've said, APEC, China-Arab Summit. And all this, I think, is, again, providing this, because the world situation has this urgency asking for China's voice. That's why President Xi's bilateral or multilateral show up to provide head of state diplomacy is the key for China to voice out and for the world to understand exactly where China is standing. And after that, I think on the working level, then China can communicate better and having a more smooth working relationship with other countries, because they now have a clear signal of what China is trying to do and trying to achieve.
More than any time, we now need upright leaders with what is called exceptional strategic insight and guidance in this world. Gentlemen, thank you so much. Stay with me. And let's cross over to CGTN's Tian Wei, standing by at the Media Center in Beijing. Tian Wei, you had a question. You were able to ask a question to the foreign minister about the Israel-Gaza conflict. What are some of the other key takeaways from the press conference you were able to get today?
Yes, indeed. CGTN did secure an opportunity to ask the Chinese foreign minister about the latest situation on the conflict between Israel and Palestinian, which has been going on for decades. Of course, this is, as for Chinese Foreign Ministry, Wang put it out, this is the very foundation to test the international justice. As we know, that conflict has been going on for decades, and it is also reflected in some of the latest events in the Middle East. For example, the U.S. and Israeli joint attacks against Iran. Many of the issues are very much related to one another. By the way, this is a grand occasion, shall we say, annual presser by the Chinese Foreign Ministry Wang Yi to journalists not only from China but those coming from all over the world to tune in to this event. We have seen this presser quite an open, constructive, and also friendly tone, but at the same time holding on to the principles and the values China has been sharing with many others about diplomacy in the modern era. And at the same time providing reminders and even at times advice to some of those involved in hotspot issues what might be the way forward. We have also noticed that this is a reflection of the world has changed. Since last year, we see the world is going through much more uncertainties, geopolitical conflicts, as well as trade wars, tariff wars, tech wars, and the list goes on. People want certainties. People want credibilities. People want justice. And last but certainly not least, people want peace. So you see China's earlier proposal and suggestions are working together for all of these goals are having ever strong echo among the journalists even present here today. You heard questions coming from journalists in Asia, Africa, Latin America, coming from North America, Europe, and the list goes on. People are looking for that. The Global Governance Initiative is a great example. China is not just saying it, China is doing it. That is reflected in how China is dealing with some of the hotspot issues, such as the U.S.-Israeli joint attack on Iran and Iran's retaliatory actions against these two countries and the U.S. military base in the Gulf region. And also it's reflected in China how to deal with the major power relations, such as between that China and the United States, with the media suggestion of the U.S. president going to visit China at the end of March and early April. It's reflected in the European leaders' recent frequent visits to China, and also reflected in China's efforts of building the global south together with other partners, reflected in China's neighborly relations with our friends and partners in the neighbor and also in the Asia-Pacific region. It's also reflected in China's way of working together with others, such as Africa, Latin America. So nobody wants bullying. Nobody wants uncertainties. Nobody wants lack of trust. So that is reflected, I think, a very clear signal in today's press conference. Earlier, you have seen the world trying to digest what does it mean, a community of shared future for mankind. But certainly now, people understand it much better and the importance of that. Having said that, though, many believe China's diplomacy has gone through decades of thorough thinking. And at this moment of critical juncture, China is presenting the world and working together with the world for peace, stability, and also to particularly work with the global south, such as the Chinese foreign minister pointed out, through BRICS, through SCO, and also through 77 plus China. These platforms, later, of course, there's the APEC economic leaders meeting being held in China, China-Arab Summit. Some of you also noted in the earlier in the studio. So you can see China is doing it. So China's thoroughly thought of philosophy in diplomacy is ever more welcomed by the journalists who are asking questions. And I'm sure their audience back at home. Back to you.
At a critical juncture today, a tad little more clarity from China that is much appreciated by the rest of the world. Our Tianwei at the Media Center today. Thank you so much. And Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi says China and the U.S. cannot remodel one another, but can choose how they want to engage.
中美都是大国，我们都改变不了彼此。
China and the US are both big countries. Neither side can remodel the other, but we can choose how we want to engage. That is, to commit to a spirit of mutual respect, to hold the bottom line of peaceful coexistence, and to strive for the prospect of win-win cooperation. That's what serves the interests of Chinese and American peoples, and that's also the expectation of the international community. It is heartening to see that the presidents of the two countries have led by example. By maintaining good interactions at the top level, they have provided important strategic safeguard for the China-US relationship to improve and move forward. And they have brought the relationship back on an even keel after the ups and downs. This year is indeed a big year for China-US relations. The agenda of high-level exchanges is already on the table. What the two sides need to do now is to make thorough preparations accordingly, create a suitable environment, manage the risks that do exist, and remove unnecessary disruptions. China is always committed and open. It is critical that the U.S. work in the same direction. I believe that when the two sides treat each other with sincerity and good faith, we will be able to lengthen the list of cooperation and shorten the list of problems. We will be able to, under the strategic guidance of the two presidents, produce results satisfactory to both peoples, achieve consensus welcomed by the whole world, and make 2026 a landmark year of sound, steady, and sustainable development of China-US relations.
A lot of interest on the next possible meeting between the two presidents, obviously, because of state of leader diplomacy and because of what's at stake here. The foreign minister did say that what remains important now is thorough preparations and also creating a suitable environment for China-US relations. How do you interpret what remains to be the central tasks here, Professor?
I think first, the Minister of Foreign Affairs made it very clear this will be a very important or even decisive year for U.S.-China relations in which the head of state will play an important role and decisive role, leading role in leading the bilateral relationship into the right direction. For doing that, of course, the good news is that both head of states seems to be committed to lead this relationship to be a good direction. That's why Minister Wang Yi said, emphasized that both sides has to be thoroughly prepared for this, and they have to work in the same direction. They have to put the action where the mouth is. They have to make sure they have a good faith, good willingness, and thorough preparation so that can work towards that direction to create a kind of healthy and right prepared environment for this bilateral relationship. The challenges, of course, is first is a great uncertainty, not from China's side, from U.S. side first. And the second challenge, of course, given the global environment, which is in great uncertainty in terms of geopolitical situation or trade situation. We know who is a white elephant in the room in this regard. The United States also have to truly committed to what they want, that is a good relationship. And I believe that if both sides can have good faith, trust each other, and can commit it and be persistent in that directions, and I believe there will be very fruitful and successful year for the U.S.-China relationship. Of course, the condition is that both sides will continue this right path.
What does it mean moving in the same direction? Because the foreign minister said that China stays open committed, positive. It takes the United States that moves in the same direction for that to happen. But Professor Wang just now mentioned uncertainty. We know the current administration, the Trump administration, is in a habit of launching unilateral actions, including tariff barriers that could harm relations or jeopardize relations, including those relations with China. So by saying moving in the same direction, what does China expect from the United States at this point?
I think right now there are two interesting words coming out of Foreign Minister Wang Yi. One is that he said two leaders led by example. That means right now the two head of states are actually walking towards each other, working together in a way. However, there are other factors, as we know, in the United States are not actually aligned with President Trump's view on China and action on China. So from time to time, there are inconsistent policies coming out of the United States disrupting the current relationship. So that's one factor. And second factor, of course, second word is sustainability. For U.S.-China to sustain current stability and move forward to reduce the list of conflict and increase the list of cooperation, of course, we need a more stable structure. However, since the first Trump administration, the bilateral regular talks and regular communication channels are disrupted. And reconstruction of that channels is very difficult so far. So I think it's important for this time, if there's a visit of Trump to China, there are two factors needs to be resolved. One is making sure that the U.S. government is consistent of its policy towards China. And secondly, there will be effective mechanisms established so that moving forward, two sides can constantly communicate with each other, reducing the mistakes, the risks of misunderstanding and misrepresenting each other.
Great insight, gentlemen. A question about China's neighborhood policy, because Chinese policy towards its neighbors follows the principles of amity, sincerity, mutual benefit, and inclusiveness. And also the foreign minister said this is another priority in China's diplomacy. So, Professor, how should we understand the core vision behind these four words?
As a core vision is that China has confidence that if we all work together and based on mutual respect and mutual equality and mutual benefit, we can have a great future for the entire neighborhood, including China, we call the Asian Pacific. But by saying that, having said that, we also have to recognize some challenges in this. One of them, of course, we just mentioned, is a kind of very bad behavior and anti-history, on the wrong side of history behavior by Takaichi administration, and by trying to kind of restore the Japan's bad history. And second, we also have some other challenges that some players in the neighborhood, with intervention of the other powers outside the region, try to provoke some disputes or even tensions. But I think that if China insists on the 5 principles and also insists on peaceful development, the mutual respect and dialogue, I think that China's good neighborhood policy will be fruitful, because China not only being consistent on this policy, but China back up this kind of good neighborhood with very, very good policies. For example, China said openness, inclusiveness, all of this will do it together. China will take so-called unilateral actions, and China will never use force to do this. I always argue that, after 1991, we have seen many crises in this world. We have a Kosovo crisis, Georgia crisis, Ukraine crisis, Serbia crisis, and so on and so forth. But we also have tension in South China Sea, across Taiwan Strait, and the Diaoyu Islands, and also North Korean nuclear weapon problems. All the crises managed by the Western powers, especially the United States, every one of them end up in a war, not a single exception. But all the tensions and crises managed by China in this part of the world, none of them have any violence happen, not a single bullet was fired. That's a great example, but the fact what China really wants. China wants peace. China wants mutually beneficial development, the so-called win-win multi-war and the win-win situation. I think that Minister Wang Yi's press conference further, further emphasize on that approach, that is approach for peace, for cooperation, coordination.
What about the principle of 外交为民, or at the end of the day, diplomacy is about the people, for the betterment of the people, and to benefit the people? You see the Ministry of Foreign Affairs establish all these hotlines and consular services all over the world to extend a helping hand to Chinese people overseas. And also, we've put in place the visa-free policies for many countries so that their citizens can come to China with more convenience at ease. Mr. Zhao, what is your understanding of the importance and value of this principle?
I think this year there are at least 3 questions related to people-to-people exchanges and China's foreign assets, safety of China's foreign asset. It is important to protect our interest overseas, protect our people overseas, because there's increasing threat to the security of travel, to the security of our business relationship with the outside world, and the threat is real. So I think opening up those hotlines and making sure that the Chinese people, including our Taiwan people, that in a under threat or in the dangerous situations, they will be protected and be extracted on time. And the other thing, of course, is that because of recent visa-free policies, there is increasing foreigners visiting China. And the good side of that is because the foreign media, particularly Western media, always demonize and distort China's real pictures, real life in China. So when millions of Westerners and other countries coming to visit and see the real China, they realize that the bias that the Western media has been imposed upon them. So there's a great awakening around the world about what really China represents and what is the real life in China. And with that, I think it's much easier for China to promote its diplomacy, to promote its notion of shared community for the future.
Nothing shatters bias and bigotry more than just being there on the ground, seeing everything by yourself. And by the way, it's not just Chinese tourists traveling abroad needing protection and services. It's also Chinese companies and Chinese employees that are growingly and increasingly being stationed abroad. Thank you so much. And Chinese Foreign Minister Wang says that global governance initiative fully meets the common expectations of the international community. Take a listen.
Why is the GGI able to draw such widespread response? I believe the key lies in the 5 major principles advocated by the GGI, namely sovereign equality, international rule of law, multilateralism, a people-centered approach, and real actions. They meet the common expectations of the international community and reflect the shared aspirations of people from all countries. The most explicit message of the GGI is that the leading status of the UN must be upheld, not challenged. The central role of the UN must be strengthened, not weakened. The UN is not perfect, but without the UN, the world would only be worse. Creating parallel structures outside the UN, or worse still, putting together various exclusive blocs and circles, is unpopular and unsustainable. China is a founding member of the UN and a staunch defender of its cause.
The Global Governance Initiative, since it was proposed by the Chinese president, has been very well received around the world. But although China proposed it, China can't be the only one implementing or improving on it. It really takes a village here for that to happen, and it doesn't happen overnight. Professor, how do we as a global community push forward this global governance initiative and really see changes taking place?
First and foremost, the GGI proposed by Xi Jinping is inconsistent with existing international order. Some Western media or some people say, oh, China want to create its own international order, replace this one. Is totally nonsense, because the global governance initiative proposed by China, like Minister Wang said very clearly, is consistent with the existing international order centered on United Nations. United Nations is still the central piece. China try to maintain it, even though it's not perfect. And the first. The second that is the GGI is based on the 5 principles. Among them, most importantly, is the equality, mutual respect, and multilateralism, peace, and inclusiveness. That all the countries has to be equal player in this mechanism, in this action. And last but not the least, of course, China's global initiative by very nature is inclusive compared to some other proposals like very exclusive, try to establish something outside the UN mechanism. All of this is very counterproductive and very damaging the international. So in that regard, China made a firm commitment. First and foremost is maintain the current existing international system. And based on that, based on this rule-based order, China tried to promote something better for everyone, not just for China, including everyone. I think that commitment is firm and persistence is there, justice is there, wisdom is there. So if you look at China GGI, you have to have 5 keywords here. Number 1, of course, is a vision. China invasion. This is the only way that is hopeful, that will promote international peace and stability. And second is justice, has to be justice. And third is a wisdom. And the fourth, of course, wisdom is inclusiveness. And last but not least is a persistence. You have to be persistent, pushing for that.
All right, gentlemen, I'm afraid that's all the time we have here. We do want to thank you so much for keeping us company and for your great insight and expertise as always. Thank you so much for coming in today. That is it for our special coverage on the Foreign Minister's press conference in Beijing. On behalf of the entire team here, thank you so much for watching. Stay with CGTN.